The real issue in this debate is that both regimes, to be successful, depend on fiscal discipline and monetary prudence. And each will become undermined by fiscal indiscipline and monetary laxity. For example, fiscal deficits put pressure on the exchange rate. The connection between the two is sometimes convoluted and depends on the regime you have, but ultimately each fiscal deficits are going to put pressure on the exchange rate. Let me give you one example. Again, I warn you, slightly convoluted, of the transmission mechanism. If there's a fiscal deficit and the government seeks to borrow to cover the fiscal deficit, it raises the cost of capital because it raises interest rates. These high interest rates tend to attract a capital inflow from abroad to take advantage of these attractive rates. Now, if you have a flexible exchange rate regime, then as foreign exchange flows into the economy, you are going to have an appreciation of the exchange rate, an appreciation of the currency. And that makes your domestic production uncompetitive. If you have a fixed exchange rate, then as foreign capital comes in, because you have a fixed exchange rate, the central bank has to buy that excess foreign exchange as it is coming in. And that puts Jamaican dollars into the economy, that puts local currency into the economy, and causes a bit of inflation. Well, if you have local prices rising, but your exchange rate remains the same, your local production becomes uncompetitive again. So regardless of your regime, the fiscal deficit creates an uncompetitive domestic production, which means your import substitutes, what you're producing that is competing with imports, now is at a competitive disadvantage. People start to buy imports. And your exporters become equally uncompetitive and are unable to sell in foreign markets. The same is true if, even in the absence of a fiscal deficit, there is unwarranted money creation by the central bank. Because unwarranted money creation creates an unbacked demand for foreign exchange. That demand for foreign exchange is going to have consequences for the exchange rate under either regime. Rather more drastic consequences in a fixed exchange rate regime, because again, the central bank has made a promise to supply any demand for foreign exchange. So when this unbacked money creation shows up at the foreign exchange window, the central bank has to sell its reserves. If this keeps up, at some point, the central bank is going to run out of reserves and be unable to defend the fixed exchange rate. Because we said the only thing that keeps it fixed is the willingness of the central bank to trade at that rate and the ability. So the conclusion is that whether or not you have a fixed or a flexible exchange rate, in the absence of fiscal balance or something close to fiscal balance, in the absence of extreme prudence with monetary policy, your exchange rate is going to come under pressure. So the only question is, how does the pressure manifest in each kind of regime? Well, if you have a flexible exchange rate regime, then the exchange rate pressure results in fairly continuous and smooth exchange rate movements more frequently. If you have a fixed exchange rate regime, well, you don't have that option. The exchange rate is fixed, the economy remains uncompetitive. And what experience and history tells us happens is that speculators start to wonder if the government is going to devalue the fixed rate. And once they get it into their head that a devaluation is a possibility, then you get capital flight. You get people buying foreign exchange to hold it until after the devaluation, and they make a one-time killing. But that worsens the problem.